Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group. Tonight, we have Dave Carroll, who's going to be presenting on how to automate Twitter using the Twitter API. And we're going to hand it over to Dave.
All right. So I'm guessing everybody can see the slides.
Yep.
Okay. So this talk or this presentation is about using PowerShell to talk with the Twitter API. So who am I? I've been automating with PowerShell since version 2, somewhere around the 2009 timeframe. Like one of the first things I did was convert a ton of VB script to PowerShell and was communicating with a Lava EDU server, which was a predecessor to Office 365. Currently, I'm a DevOps engineer for a national lender, and I've been, for the last couple of years, I've been calling myself a PowerShell developer. And it was a little bit of a mindset to go that, to basically say a developer as opposed to scripter or whatever. I've been blogging about PowerShell since August of 2018. I'm a contributor to the PowerShell conference book, volumes 1 and 2. And I was really floored whenever Jeff Hicks asked me to participate in the PS Blog Week for PS7 Now. That was like, oh, well, have I made it? Is that what this is? So in any case, this is who I am. My Twitter handles and pretty much everywhere, like GitHub, things like that, is down at the bottom right. So here's the agenda. We're gonna first kind of discuss, why did I create a new PowerShell module? There's already a few out there. We're gonna look at the Twitter API itself, and that's basically the documentation by Twitter. Then we'll take a look at the module, how I do authentication, how I actually call the API, and how I do output and the errors, and we'll just take a look at some of the simple functions. Then we'll do some live tweeting and then talk about the next steps. So why a new PowerShell Twitter module? A couple of years ago, year and a half ago, I reached out to the writer of the PS Twitter API module, Mark, and I asked him if I could do a how-to blog post for his module, like I did for the PSG suite. And he said, sure, go right ahead. And as I was going through that, there were some things that it was obvious that the commands didn't seem to be, they weren't like verb dash noun. They were lengthy names. And I noticed that there was a lot of chatter in the issues about, hey, let's kind of make this more best practice, based and things like that. In any case, I pretty much stepped away, didn't do the article, and I just waited. Didn't really wait. I kind of went about my life and did other things, and then the first of this year, there was someone that's I guess got interested in using the PS Twitter API and was asking questions in the Slack channel. Anyway, since I'd done a little bit of upfront research, I was like conversing with that person, and we decided that essentially maybe we needed a community-led PowerShell module that was user-friendly, as opposed to one that strictly adhered to how the API was laid out. So that's about when we decided that let's do this. And then I guess I was the one that, since I was the squeaky wheel. Originally, I decided, I'll just go ahead and do this and try to get some input. So I wrote the module, and I think back in May, and it's just been kind of sitting ever since. There's been maybe a couple of people that's asked about it. It's not in the PowerShell gallery. It's just in a repo. I have the link for the repo at the end of the slide deck. And yeah, so basically, I've been trying to get feedback, input from the community. I've threw out some tweets, asked about it, and asked for input. And then there was maybe in May, there was a PS tweet chat Friday that I actually, every tweet that I did, including the images and things like that, was with the module. And the way I have designed the module, when I realized that I was lacking, like, I think it was a very simple thing, like maybe even send a tweet command. It was a matter of like 5 minutes, and now I've got a command, and I didn't have to sweat it to build the new, to build it out. So that was like right at the beginning of the of that PS tweet chat hour. But I was, really quickly using that command to start, throwing things out. So anyway, that's really why a new module. It's not necessarily to compete. It's basically one to have a community-based a module that the community would be happy to use and would put feedback into, and it would grow and be used like that. So that would be why. So the Twitter API itself is the version 1 is not very well documented. I mean, there's a lot of documentation, but there's a lot of, it's prone to errors, I guess. And the way that the PS Twitter API module runs is it goes out and basically screen scrapes the documentation, and then it builds the commands from that. So I'm going to just take a look at the API documentation on Twitter. So that's where we're at now, and the V2 version 2 is something that's they're just now releasing individual endpoints. So this is not a discussion of APIs in general and endpoints and really probably the most thing that's generalized about APIs is going to be the authentication piece. So anyway, we have, even within the version 1.1 of the API, you've got your standard, your premium, and your enterprise. Basically, the standard is free, and then you have to pay for additional things. And you can see here what the additional things are, like a standard search on a standard level for a search, you're only going to get 7 days worth. Whereas if you wanted to pony up some money, then you can have you can have more, 30 days or even the full archive. So with the API itself, and like I said, they have good documentation. They provide their own tools. One of the tools that they have is called Twirl, and it is a command line tool that lets you interface with the API.
So Dave, let me ask you a question. Is that, so this, using the same module, you can use any one of those features, just a matter of the connector you're going to use, the account you're going to log into, and the API key you're going to use. And so you can use the same module that you're going to show us in just a second, if I had, enterprise access or premium access, I can do more searches. Just the data that comes back is going to be more verbose, right?
Maybe. The thing is, if the endpoint is the same endpoint and the application is the only thing that's really different, then yes. I think there might be some endpoints that are specific to these different levels, the pay gates or whatever. So that would be yeah. So I think the answer is like, I believe, but
okay.
Will you be demoing the standard API? Sorry.
Oh yeah. So
okay.
The standard is free, and also I don't know if there's any distinction between the standard and the version 2 of the API. I think there probably eventually will be version 2 with some of these same endpoints for premium and enterprise. But definitely the standard, and you can do a lot with the standard. One of the things out of the gate that is going to be different is going to be the throttling. So there's going to be a rate limit for, that's a certain level for standard, and a rate limit that's higher for premium, I think, and then even higher for enterprise. So that's one of the things that you have to kind of deal with. So I'm going to go to the API docs, and still they break things up. Again, I signed up for early access for the API v2. They also have something called Twitter Labs, which is a place where you go and it's endpoints that they are just testing out, and they're getting feedback from the from the community. And I don't have anything in it yet, but there was some mock-ups that I did that actually talked with the labs, and the labs eventually become what is going to be the V2 pieces. So I guess now's a good time to say, whenever you start, let's say there's an API that you need to interface with, one of the first things you need to do is learn the API, regardless of what you're going to use to connect to it, right? So you need to get in and read the documentation, see how they do things, and then start kind of mocking around or doing some mock-ups. Like I use Insomnia, which is a post. It's a REST API client, and some people may have heard of Postman. They're basically the same thing. So this is the it's just like getting a user or whatever. Let's see if I still got that right. Yeah. Anyway, so this essentially is that's like, this is one of the things that I would use to kind of validate that I can connect and do things before I start getting into coding with PowerShell. So it's really important to learn the API before you start messing with it. And then when you learn it, they're going to start rolling out a new version. And there's the way I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
So people were interested in Insomnia. Could you tell them a little bit more about that? That like an open source tool?
Yeah. It's definitely open source, or at least it's free to download. This is I forget the version that they call it. So it's Insomnia something.
So what does it look like when you open that tool because you've already logged into the API?
Yeah. So this Insomnia Designer, I think, no, Insomnia Core. This is what was, so that they changed this about, I don't know, a few months ago. Insomnia Core is what you would want to download and use there. And then as far as just opening up into it, let me close this out. And opening. So there's within Insomnia, you can set up these workspaces. Like I've got Spotify that I was trying to play with, and Insomnia is another. I forget exactly what that one is, but then my DNS API, I was working with that. So these things, you can set up workspaces, and in the workspace, you can essentially have your tokens and secrets and all that configured. So like if you were to look here, you see this API key. These things are stored in a like an environment for this particular workspace. So you don't have to go back and start keying something in, or you just have one place to change it, and then you can make this you can use them in here, sort of like their variables. But yeah, so this so I guess the REST clients, you could use Coral as a REST client. You can use Insomnia. You can use Postman. I think a lot of the developers like using Postman, and I don't know how I got onto this one instead of Postman, but I can add that to some links down, like after the fact. But again, knowing your API would definitely be what you need to start doing. And then the next thing would be, once you've see how to do some of the things, like there's probably what was that? May not be here, but there's a place that helps you do the like the authentication. It'll walk you through that. I just can't seem to find it right now. One of the things also about the V1 and the V2 is the V1, well, the 1.1 uses OAuth 1A, and there's very little of the OAuth 2 bearer token, but I think all of the V2 uses the bearer token, or can use the bearer token, like if it's a read-only thing, or they'll default back to the 1.1. And we'll get into the OAuth 1 versus 2 a little later. The OAuth was a little challenging to figure out how to handle that. Any case, let me see where I'm at. Like I said, learn the API, then start working it. And each one of these has their own endpoint. So we look at the API reference. We want to search for users. So this is basically what you're going to be posting against. And these are the parameters. If you notice that this has page, that'll come up later on. Obviously, there's tons of data in Twitter, and some things that you call for Twitter will be they'll just return all that they can return, which I think maybe tops out at like 1,000 records. Some things you can get more than that if it's paged, or there's another thing also called cursored. Again, we'll get into that. But all of these things need to know, like, and here's an example of using Coral to go out and get, looks like they're looking for soccer. and so curl and then twirl. So twirl is easier because it has all this other things built in. So that's probably it about the API. Actually, let me look. Let me show you. So there's a developer portal. So the downside to using the module is you have to register as a developer with Twitter. And then you have to create your application. And then you create your key and token, and then you basically assign the permissions. But when I first did this, there's not any way to create to create the application, the module, and then just let anybody use it without them also creating this. And probably if I was like a full-fledged web developer, I might be able to come back in here. So I know this callback URL would be used to grant like tokens to individual users. So much like your Twitter clients, that's not really Twitter, but Twitter clients for the phone, they use something similar to this. So you go out, it'll take you out to Twitter. You authenticate, say that application can log in as you, and then it'll be you'd get a token, and then the token saved in your your phone app or whatever. But obviously there's nothing like that I have set up, and to do that you would probably you would have to have some site that would take this input in, and then I guess have a way for the end user to approve your PowerShell module to be able to work as them. Also, this app usage, like if you were to go in and fill this out, there was a particular limit, and I didn't want to keep coming up with new things to write, so I just copied it a couple of times just to meet the limit. If you happen to notice that, yeah. So you'd have to come in and create an app and go through these hoops to just to be able to use the module. And that's holds true for any of the other modules as well. The one that Adam Bertram did, which is sort of limited, and then the one that Mark did, the PS Twitter API. You still have to go through this step for all of those. Yeah, so I think let's start looking at the module. And so, well, actually, maybe I should stop and ask if anybody has any questions. Any other questions?
I think we're all pretty good so far. We're just excited to see the module.
Okay. So what I've done here is I've got the Twitter module. I have this is not like a full-fledged scaffolding. Again, I originally wrote this as sort of a proof of concept, and then wanted to start fleshing things out. So in any case, one of the first decisions that I did was to require PowerShell 7. Mostly I wanted to require dealing with the invoke REST method, invoke web request. It's a huge difference in what is returned between Windows PowerShell 5.1 and PowerShell Core and PowerShell 7. So I wanted to just go ahead and not have to deal with that kind of compatibility. It's a new module. PowerShell 7 had already been released, and it's like, well, let's just go with that. So that's why PowerShell 7, and I guess I could probably go over here. That's why PowerShell 7 was the minimum version. So there's not a lot of goodness in here, I guess. One of the things, though, is and I think I brushed upon this in one of the lightning talks. Turned out it was not suited well for a lightning talk. Is this OAuth parameters class, PowerShell custom class that I wrote. So with OAuth 1, there are several components that are needed to be able to communicate with Twitter and with anything. So let me go back a couple just so I can show you this example. So this OAuth nonce, OAuth signature, the customer key, timestamp, token, version, all of this information, which is in the header. I wanted something that could generate this and something that could help transport all the rest of the data that I deemed important through each of the calls. So that's why I decided to create this OAuth parameters. So I have, HTTP method, the base URI, the query itself, which is something that is used by the front end functions to, quickly build. So then this guy, this unescaped query string. So in OAuth, you have to escape the query strings, and you'll see more about that down below. But essentially, also I wanted to have two ways to instantiate the new OAuth parameter class. And so this one, you can see there's both of them have the method and the base URI. There are some commands that do not need a query or do not contain a query, and I didn't want to have to put in, pass in null or whatever. So the signature for this new is going to be that. Let me jump over here. Yeah.
We had a request if you could bump the font up a little bit. Nice.
Requests like that are nice. Keep them coming. If they're harder, maybe not, but we'll still try to accommodate. Oh, no wonder. Okay, now what I was trying to do was Yeah. So when you try to do a new up on a class like this, these are the signatures for that. So basically, if you pass in 2 strings, it'll pick these up as HTTP method plus the base URI. If you new up a new one and you include a hash table, then it'll just add that to it. So that is the reason why I wanted to have 2 separate um, instantiations for the class itself. And was there somebody had a question?
No, I was just trying to see how we would use this and that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. So let me get over here and just do. So here I create the parameters, basically assign it to the variable, new it up, and put in the get and the query that I built up above, and then the URI that it needs to go to, right?
So let's help out some of the people that are really green to this kind of concept, because you
Okay.
went in pretty deep here, right? So what you're
Very much.
doing is you're using OAuth. You're basically going to authenticate to the API, and then once you make that authentication, you're then going to be able to use the commandlets of the API to then do the things you want to do, right? That's the basic idea here.
Yeah. So with OAuth, it's you send your authentication information and what
That's
you
right.
want back at the same time.
Yes, that's right. That's my mistake. So
Yeah,
I'm just trying to level set, because I think there's a lot of people, myself included, you went in through a pretty deep level that people might not understand what you were trying to get to. So
gotcha. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at this simple one. This basically is a get tweet, and let's go out. We'll just pick up this. Where was the? I'm trying to find the like go out to the actual tweet, the original. I just do that. So all I needed was this tweet ID. And now I go back over here and do get tweet ID. And yeah, it didn't bomb. So anyway, this is the tweet. You don't have to. So with OAuth, there's not a connect. Like with Exchange, you would connect first. With Azure, you would connect first, and then you would essentially have an open session. That's not the same with OAuth. So anyway,
how did you get the tweet ID?
Oh, it's in the URL. So the URL.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in any tweet, so
you're looking at the web version of the tweet, pulling
yeah,
the tweet ID off the end. Okay.
yeah. So and this is just a quick way of doing it, as opposed to kind of going through and pulling my timeline and things like that. This is much quicker. And in fact, when I did the PS Tweet chat, this is how I was replying to tweets and retweeting and things like that. So this was how I was pulling that.
Scraping the ID from it?
I'm just copying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah. So just copying the ID, and then so that
but the
ID
use
is
of the module would be something where you're going to query for a bunch of tweets that are like you're looking for a certain hashtag or whatever. And when you get those tweets, you can pull the tweet ID for the one that you want off of that.
Right.
That kind of the concept of the module.
Yeah. Well, and actually does more than that. So there was a few a few PS tweet chats back where we had talked about having something that would automatically do a PS Follow Friday, potentially having curated lists from different people, a Twitter list, and then something like this could be used to read in the list and then randomly pick, here's 8 people to follow on, this PS Follow Friday, something like that. So it's more than just tweets and users. It's pretty much anything like, who follows you, who you follow, and if you want to like something or if you want to reply to a tweet, things like that.
So you built a lot of these directly from the API. What is available in the API? Not so much even, hey, you had a purpose and say, hey, I want to do this, and added a commandlet just for that purpose. It's more of like, this is as close to the full documented API that's available.
Yeah. So I've actually included the endpoints that are part of this into a JSON that you can get by looking at the Twitter API endpoint. So I know that. So for the Git account settings, here's the API reference. So you can go out to that, to that URL. Here's the description. Here's the URI that's going to be in the command, and here's the Git. Here's the method that's going to be in the command. And this is essentially manually coded to this. This is what that is being read in as. And that's in I put that in here. So this Git content, actually that's error mapping.
Yeah, so the idea is there. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So anyway, I knew that I wanted to keep track of what I had done. That way I could go back through here and search it pretty quick or whatever, or, an end user could use this to see, well, I want to do this, and this is the endpoint now. What is there? What I don't have, I'm just thinking about, is in this endpoint JSON probably should be the PowerShell command. I mean, because this isn't any. This structure is something that I created. It's nothing that's already there. So yeah, I probably need to include the PowerShell command in here, so people can actually cross-reference that. Anyway,
thank you.
So I did get into. There's so much about the authentication piece that is really important to nail down. And I guess that's why I wanted to get into the authentication first. Anyway, so let's look at this thing. This is probably what I should have put up first before even getting into the authentication piece. So there's a couple of versions. There's like OAuth v1 0A, I think, and then OAuth 2. The 2 is what a lot of people use a lot. It's called bearer token. Sometimes you may see it as the JWT or the Java Web Token. So some Twitter APIs v2s are OAuth 2. All of the legacy, it definitely, I think all of the legacy supports the v1, and there might be some of the API. I think some of the v2 Twitter API supports this v1 authentication. There's a lot of V's in there. I'm hoping that's not too confusing.
So I'm kind of curious as to like, how do I get started with it? And so really, and that's kind of, sorry, I'm gonna kind of cut you off there. Like,
Okay.
I see some of this stuff and like, I'm trying to like, how do I apply it to my, my usage?
Right. So,
I'll answer that. So Dave, this is Jonathan. I reached out to you. We had a little bit of a chat. So one of the things that I did is I registered. I went through the process about 2 months ago of registering an application through Twitter, and going through the process and getting approved. And so I just have some custom code around invoke REST method. And what I've been doing is scraping Twitter I've been creating custom queries for specific stock quotes, and the number of times people have talked about stock quotes. And so I look for a ticker, and I'll query that, and then return the results, and then I'll gauge the interest in a stock based off of that. So for my use case, I don't know if this is really relevant, but for my use case, that was really my reasoning behind that. So, I don't know.
So it's really beyond the idea of like it's setting up an app more than interacting directly with, Twitter with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't post tweets with my application. I just use it to scrape the data and tweets. But again, that could be something that Dave, your module supports. I haven't done that. All my usage was to basically get, like I said, a few stock tickers and find out how many times it's been mentioned in a matter of like 10 days or something.
So I originally conceived of this as, well, this was my original use case. I write an article for my blog, and now I want to announce that on Twitter, on Reddit, on LinkedIn, and I need to be able to do that programmatically, and instead of having to go through every time and do it manually, even though I may copy the same text and then paste it into the next social media to the next social media. So that was one of the things that I was wanting to do, was basically use it to announce. And I was going to probably use GitHub Actions to be the hook that would actually go out and do it, since my blog lives in GitHub. Of course, I could always use the CI that builds the site, but in any case, that was my original use case, was to announce things programmatically that I publish on my blog. So the use case could be anything, but for the most part, I mean, obviously, you don't want to write you don't want to go in at the command level and have to type in a huge tweet or whatever, unless you just hate the GUI, because it's so much faster with the GUI. It's just the things where you're automatically getting, like, getting data from, or getting the list membership of of a Twitter list for a particular user, things like that. It's so much easier to do it programmatically. Even if you manipulate it manually, it's still going to be easier to do that. That way, you could save it to CSV, Excel, whatever, without having to, because there's not really any easy way to grab it straight from the web UI. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I guess maybe instead of doing what I was doing, let's go to the next thing, or go backwards, I guess I should say. Yeah, so these simple functions that that we were looking at, this get tweet. So It was either this or another one that at the beginning of that PS tweet chat hour, I had forgotten to write. But how I built these things out, and we'll go into this next. This was fairly easy to build. I mean, it looks very simple. All of these, once you handle what could be sent into the API, ultimately it is just sending this OAuth parameters into one of three handlers in the background, private functions. So like this again, it looks complex, but it's really just handling the potential options. So whereas the PS Twitter API, each one of these sections would have another, would be like an get Twitter friendship underscore screen name underscore underscore lookup or underscore something else like show. So this is handling multiple parameter sets to be able to work with essentially the friendships piece, but even though it might be a list or a lookup or even incoming or outgoing, like who wants to be my friend, sort of would be that would be the incoming. Again, like get Twitter list. This part again is simple. This part is simple. And this part is simple. So ultimately, it's going to run this command.
So your invoke Twitter request is a wrapper around invoke REST method, right? Is that be accurate? Okay.
Yeah. So this is the invoke Twitter request, and there's several functions that are private that invoke the API. So in the API itself, they have standard calls, and I said standard. Basically, this is just normal calls where you send something and you get back all that they have, or you can do paged or you can do cursored calls. So I wanted to have the private functions to do all the heavy lifting, and let the simple functions like we were looking at do, that's what the end user will be interfacing with. So like the end user shouldn't really care if it's a cursored call or a page request. They should just want to get the data that they want. So that's why I wrote these invokes. And because it is PowerShell 7, I can use a single invoke, invoke private function, whereas my Posh DNS API module, I had to have an invoke for core and an invoke for basically desktop for Windows PowerShell. So I had to have two separate ones. But for this, we can take a look at this Twitter request. It pulls in the OAuth parameters, and let me. So the command is sending the OAuth parameters, and that's all it's sending to this Twitter request. When it does that, I use this get OAuth signature string, this method, which is essentially like a function on a class, but it's a method to generate. Actually, this string is what I mentioned earlier. We get back to this. That function generates this string. Sorry, this method generates that string. and I've got this nonce, which is basically it's a don't ever let this combination of things ever be the same. Even with the timestamp, I guess you could have two calls at almost exactly the same time or at the same time. This will make sure that it doesn't happen.
So let me kind of stop you there. You're kind of like going deep on exactly how the module's working and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm way beyond my element here. And actually, I think that's super cool, and to that regard. And so I'm more of like looking for how would I use it, and even like some of the value in which to interface with it. And I hear some of what Jonathan said with, hey, here's his use case. And so, and you kind of talked about your PS Tweet chat stuff. And so, I want to kind of say, it's like, how would I use it, or what value could I get out of it? And even if I found the value in it, is how could I get started? How about that?
Could you scrape for a hashtag or?
Ooh, that's kind of cool. So effectively, it's returning a hash table.
Dave, we lost your audio.
Yeah, if you're still there,
Sorry.
no audio.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's returning ultimately it returns a JSON object, which I use the convert from JSON, which turns it into just a standard PowerShell object.
So I see statuses. And so,
yeah. So if we do statuses and then count, there's 13. And again, this might be.
Okay, so let me come back here. So you did that search, and then it comes back and it gives you an object called statuses, which is the number of tweets in the past, I guess some variable that meet that hashtag value.
Right.
Okay. And then those are the individual items in that hashtag.
Yeah. So
that meet that hashtag.
Yeah, the statuses include all of the tweets or the data, the payload that Twitter wants to hand back to us, and then this search metadata. So if we look at the search metadata, this will tell us how many that it found. This will say, hey, what's the next result? And this is how fast it completed, things like that. So if I were to do...
So the statuses were not necessarily the tweets themselves, but were another instantiation of the result?
No, the status... So for Twitter, a status is a tweet.
Okay, so it wasn't 13 tweets. You said there was 20 there.
Well, yeah, 20 here, but by default it maxed out at 20, so I just bumped it to 100. So now we have 100 tweets. 100 tweets. And if we look at,
so those are inside that object is the last 100 tweets that match the PowerShell hashtag.
Right.
And then you can figure out the text from there. So statuses and then some text.
Yeah. So let me do that. So there's a lot of retweets.
Yeah.
So this is just a straight text.
Hey Dave, I came up with I had a problem with the pure evoke rest method code. How did you solve, like, for example, if there's a popular tweet and that requires pagination, is that the term? How did you solve that? Like, what function or what code did you use to Did you use the follow relink, or isn't there like I guess if you know what I'm
Yeah.
asking? Like,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing is with so a page is a parameter for the API call. And if you want to use that, so there's going to be some that uses this Twitter page request,
Okay.
which if you see down here, it actually uses the invoke Twitter request as it. So these two invokes here just have some specific things, like this catches the next cursor, and then it until the cursor is basically 0, which means it's returned everything. It's going to just keep on looping through. And like here, I've done it to where it will. One of the problems is, say, like there's 5 pages of data, and for some reason, the second to last page fails. I didn't want to have a thing that would not give you the first 3 pages already. So even if something happens to fail, I think the way I've got it now, it will still provide you the previous, the stuff before it fails, and then it'll give you, the error itself.
Okay. No, that's great. I didn't even consider. I haven't considered writing a function that handles simply the pages of an API request. Most of the API calls, API code that I've written have really just been to query something and return it. But you take it a step further where you manage that here, which is, I think is phenomenal. So
yeah, I mean, the end user shouldn't need to know, is this a paged thing or is this a cursor thing?
Right.
It's Twitter. I mean, I just want to get it from Twitter. That's why, I don't do all the heavy lifting and the regular Twitter, the public function. I do the heavy lifting here, and then so this is so back to this, we get this auth string, OAuth string, signature string, which has to be sent in as a header. And I'm using the stuff that it returns so I can add like this response data. So one of the things I like doing, let me do this. I don't care there. So information variable, my info. So my info message data, not managed thread, message data. So this is what I'm capturing whenever you run this search tweet. And whether you display it or not depends on what you do with the information stream. So I just happen to put it into the variable. So this is the search tweet. This is the thing. This is the URL. This is the status from the server. This is which server responded on. Also, I have the rate limit. Like for this particular URI, there's a rate limit that you have to do, and obviously I've used it 4 times already. And then this is when it's going to reset. Yeah, and if you wanted to see the actual response from Twitter, it would be this.
Cool.
So yeah, I like stuffing all
That's
this,
clever.
the return stuff into the information stream, which people can use. In my my DynDNS module, I do this, but I also dump it into a variable that you basically like a module history variable where you can see all that as well.
That's really well done.
So why don't we do some examples of use cases?
Yeah.
Tweeting, getting a tweet. So I know you did it because I don't know if you know this, we're already at an hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we're gonna go long.
All right. So, it's published tweet. Not that. Uh, what is this? Just meeting. Something like that. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, I'll dump it to the verbose, and I'll go ahead and do information action as continue. So it returned back the actual command. Oh, sorry. This is verbose. This down here is the information action. That's why I usually just drop it into a file. Variable. And if we were to go to Twitter and look at this, PowerShell. Yeah, so there we go. So live tweeting from RTPSUG meeting. That is you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and now let's do. I want to retweet. This
we
guy.
retweeted it for you. The PowerShell, our RTPSUG retweeted it. So good job.
Okay. So is there? Let's see what is recent for you guys. My wife's home and the dogs are barking. I'm gonna try to mute every now and then when I need to. I'm trying to find something. Yeah, okay. So I have not retweeted this. So I'm just gonna get to this guy, returned, or get the ID for this, and then if I can remember.
Your good health. Right?
Yeah. So reply to tweet is going to be that. And let's see if there's anything else. So the media ID is if you were to send an image. The image is a whole nother bag of cats to actually do, because you have to send it up in chunks, and you can't basically you can't attach it to the tweet. You have to send it up first and get the ID of the media, and then attach it to the tweet as you do the tweet. So that's not going to be a thing right now.
GroupMe does the same thing. When I did my demo, my RTPSUG API, that was one of the things they had. And so that's pretty common with API wrappers around social media websites that offer image upload service, is you usually have to post a file to an endpoint and then return back a link where you then post it back. So that's not easy.
Okay.
I also think watching this, I think Dave has done a tremendous amount of code and thought about situations and done a really good job handling that. What's less obvious is I don't know that anybody would probably regularly tweet from the command line because there's so many pieces that are involved with the tweet. Like you said, the
Yeah.
pagination, the images, and all that stuff. But for things like searching, scheduling tweets, or like Jonathan said, searching for specific hashtags and tracking them over time, this makes it a lot easier than what you could do if you had to interact in a GUI or a browser and try to do that. And that's where a module like this really shines. So there's a lot of setup we're looking at here in order to write a tweet. And someone's probably going, wow, that seems like a whole hell of a lot of work. I just don't see people doing one-off tweets this way too often. But Jonathan's use case is perfect to explain why you would use a module like this.
Well, I think one of the other things is that, is if you figure out how to use the automation and add a command line, you can then scale, you can then automate at scale. And like, something that Josh said in the chat is like, you could search for, like have it continuously automate and look for tweets. And hey, if there's a tweet, well, then you get a toast notification. Then you can use that toast notification to then reply to that tweet and then, use the same module to send back the tweet. And so then you could do these kind of crazy things with it. Right? Is that right, Josh? Oh, he's not talking.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. He's in the chat.
He says yes.
Yeah, it's really.
I think that's
it's
where
really,
the value comes.
I have a question about this though. One of the things that I use is to essentially query. Like what I'll do is I'll say if it's from these people. So on Twitter, there's a few guys that I follow for stock analysis, essentially. And what I want to do is query what they have to say. What parameters or functions do you have that allows you to say, hey, search from this guy with this hashtag for the last X days, if that scenario exists?
Okay, well let's do that. Do you have their names?
Yeah.
Or their
Yep.
Yeah. So
Here, let me send it to you.
because I think if I were to do this, first off, let me just try to do. I'm like,
The search string, would that be the query?
yeah. So let's
from
do
colon query. Okay, so you're.
hang on a second.
I think I know what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the search query. PowerShell from blah, blah, blah.
Let's see if this works.
Here, I'm gonna send you.
We'll just see if it works with RTPSUG first. So there's, yeah, looks like it is because yep, see you on Wednesday. So yeah, that would be it. So basically whatever search format that you would use on their site, you can use.
Can you show that, Dave? That really helped me translate what query I'm using. So what Dave's doing there is in the search string, he's basically taking what you would do when you go to like search.twitter.com or whatever. Yeah. There you go. Yep. So he's doing that essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So if you populate
those three,
if you filter out this search string or make this as specific as you want, that becomes your search string. And in this case, yeah, that's pretty smart. That's a great way of doing it.
And
but for those that are
like
interested, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It looks like you can take that a step further and also save those searches.
Yeah.
Within the Twitter UI, and then you can query those saved searches. So you don't even need the full query in there. You could just pull a saved search.
Yes. Yeah, okay. That's right. In fact, that get saved search get Twitter saved search. Eventually, I want to have a set Twitter saved search, which could be used. But so then I'm guessing you would just use this to do a call. I don't know how to do that yet, but that would be something. So, Mike, we need to sort of start wrapping it up, or?
Yeah, let's try and wrap it up, and then we can certainly I certainly think people you'd be open to people reaching out to you and asking questions if they need. So right.
Yeah. So let me get over to.
And then how would people get this module and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So Dave, I don't want to new to you and say we got to wrap it up, but what I want you to do is show people the reason why they should use your module, right? So the use cases, right? So what Phil was talking about, yes, but if you feel like there's an example that you want to get out there, do it. That's fine.
Mm.
But we are going a little long, so people probably are like looking to break soon.
Yeah. So really the use case, again, for me, it was just to it was to have a way to publish or to announce an article on my blog through CI. And of course, I'm not even there yet, but that was the end goal. With Jonathan, he had a different end goal, right? So I guess it all depends on what you want to do with the data. But as you said, and interacting with Twitter from the command line to tweet daily, that's a no-go.
Well, said another way, I think once you start getting to what you're talking about is you're getting into patterns, right? So
Right.
I do X, I want Y to happen, like a trigger. Or like Jonathan said, every day I'm searching for information that always matches this pattern. That's when these tools really start to shine, to save you all that extra labor that you're doing that you would do in the web client to try to recreate saved searches or do that kind of stuff.
Right. And from just a PowerShell module standpoint, the fact that I'm using these private helper files that really do the most of the heavy lifting, like even when I send data out to the people, like this Twitter response data, it's its own separate function. So I even have specific errors that are produced whenever something happens. So it all kind of ties together. So like if I were to do, or when I do any API, I'll probably have something that will handle the authentication. I'll have something that's going to handle the invoking, that actually touches the API directly. And then I'll also have things that will handle the errors, that will handle any output. And then I will ultimately have what the end user will be using to interact with the API. So from a general PowerShell module standpoint, the whole point of doing, each function doing one thing and doing that one thing well is what I've been trying to kind of do when I separate these things out. So yeah. So this is where the module lives. It's under PowerShell modules on GitHub. This is public, should be, I'm pretty sure. And I've got a lot of things in here as far as what needs to happen next. Like I need proper scaffolding. I need to deal with the Twitter API v2. I need to deal with Twitter Labs. And most importantly, I need input from the community. The thing is, it's like you don't want to put time into something if people aren't going to use it. I put some time into it so far, and there's only been a few people that's actually reached out. And let me, if I can get this thing back up. So basically, this is where I'm at. I mean, it needs to become a proper module. It needs to have help. It needs to have pester test. It needs to handle the V2 API. It needs input from the community. Ultimately, it needs to go to the PowerShell gallery so it can get a lot more use. Because right now, you would just need to clone the repo and build the module locally. There should be a build script in there. There's
Hey,
not a build script.
Hey Dave,
Okay.
Ryan was asking if I assume he's asking you, is your Azure function a scheduled function, or was that meant for someone else? I think that was meant for you.
That might have been someone else. So I don't have anything yet using Azure Functions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was for Ryan. I think he's asking Ryan through chat.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
read that wrong. I'm sorry, guys.
So anyway, the big thing is to use the Twitter API, you have to register as a Twitter developer. There's the link to get to that. You then can start building or doing whatever. You can use this module. You could use the PS Twitter API. This module is probably easier. And as of like in May, I don't think his module was able to send images yet. I think there was like an issue still out for that. Also, here's my blog. If anybody wants to go out to check that out, and here are the links for the PowerShell conference book, the volume 1, 2, and 3. Volume 3 is great. You can get all three of these you want. We had talked about, I think, maybe doing a bundle that would have all three of these, but I don't, don't hold me to that. That's just something that has been talked about. Any case, I hope that you can see the possibilities of what this Twitter module can do. I hope that you go out and use it, create issues. Even if you just want to create an issue and say, hey, how do I do this with the module or whatever? There's a couple issues out there now. One is a error. He said it was particular for this, but it turns out that it's any cursored request is having a problem right now. But yeah, he also said, hey, what about parameter validation? So any case, come in here, add issues, look at the README. I've got some of the things in here, like how it handles the things. You need this kind of just a regular hash table before you can start using it. And for security reasons, I didn't even want to get anywhere near that, so that I already had it loaded. But yeah, eventually there hopefully will be like a published tweet thread, which you can paste in, 500 characters of text, and it will slice them out, however you want it to, something like that. Anyway, I think that's it. I don't have really anything else. If you have any follow-up questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. If you have any, if you want to know more about it, just hit me up.
Hey Dave, could you just start over since Justin just got here?
Oh,
sure.
Good job. Good job, Dave.
Yeah, great job, Dave. Ton of great content.
So let's wrap up by saying, so first off, like everybody said, really great job, Dave. I think the module looks fantastic. So you talked about how people can dive in and help. What I didn't see, because I was jumping on some other screens, is there some basic documentation on the module, on the repo, that shows them how to get started with the module?
Yeah. Basically, also notice that it says work in progress. So that's the key. But it talks about some of the capabilities and this account tokens. Obviously I don't have a link here. I'll have a link for this, that goes out to the Twitter developer, so you can at least start setting that up. I think Jonathan had that same question originally. Like I said, I haven't really gotten into this recently because I wanted to make sure that it was going to be used by people would want it without spending tons of time on it up front. So and if there's anything that needs to, if there's anything that's needed, or if somebody really wants to do X and it's not here now, create an issue for it, and I can get to it.
Cool. So with that, we'll say thank you to Dave Carroll for presenting tonight. I think you did a fabulous job. A lot of content, really deep, really well thought out module. Thank you for presenting us tonight, and thanks everybody for joining us.